All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Beaufort County Democratic Party's Candidate Forum, focusing on education in the Lowcountry. So I will be your moderator for tonight. I am Bridgette Frazier. I am a former Beaufort County School District teacher, so advocate here for our education, and also a town council representative for the town of Bluffton. Tonight, we have on panel with us Jodie Srutek, who is running for County Council seat District 7. And we also have Nathan Campbell, who's going to be running for Senate District 46 for the state of South Carolina. Welcome to you both. Do you have any opening comments you want to say, or you guys want to jump right into questions?
Well, I want to thank you, and I know Nathan as well, just for moderating this forum for us. You know, you're such an incredible voice for Bluffton and all of Beaufort County, really. You know, you've lived here for so long, and you really have your finger on the pulse of the community. So it's a pleasure to be here with you tonight.
Yeah, and I just kind of want to build off that because you're a very inspiring person in our community, and you're one of the reasons I'm running for office, because we need more people that are advocates for education. And so you showing that it can be done gets this new generation of candidates involved. And I want to thank you, and really appreciative of what you're doing and what you're going to do in the future.
Well, likewise, honored and humbled to be with both of you, and grateful for your initiative to want to jump out there in the political ring and advocate for the citizens of this community. So we'll go right into questions. Our first topic of this evening is education funding in South Carolina. So we want to talk about Act 388. Jodie, how does Act 388 impact local funding for capital improvements?
I'm sorry, it broke up a little bit. I know we're talking about Act 388. I didn't hear what you said about capital improvements.
Sure, let me repeat that. How does Act 388 impact local funding for capital improvements?
Sure. So Act 388 is it's a South Carolina state law, and it has a lot of components. It's kind of a complicated law, but the simplified version is that when they passed this law, they basically swapped our property tax for a sales tax. And so, you know, when we all bought our homes, if you're a homeowner here in Beaufort County, your realtor or your lawyer probably said to you, you know, you want to file with the treasurer's office and switch your tax rate over from the 6% to the 4% because you're now that's your primary residence. So that 4% that you pay, that goes toward paying down, you know, school debt. It's not going to an operations budget. It's going to pay down the debt that we've borrowed for capital improvements. There is no individual fund that's identified just for capital improvements. And those would be things like new schools, additions like we just opened today at the River Ridge Academy, where we have added classroom space, large scale improvements like HVAC updates and things like that. All of those types of projects, basically, we had two choices of how to fund them. One is a referendum, which is we passed the largest referendum in Beaufort County history last year. So that's one way. And then the other way we have right now is to borrow against the assets of the school district. But when we're paying our property tax on our primary homes, you know, it's not going to that type of thing. And then for our cars and people who own boats, or if they own rental properties or investment properties, our commercial businesses, those taxes go towards operations. So you know, it's kind of a mixed bag of where all the money comes from. But when we're talking about adding on to schools or building, that's either coming from referendum funding or borrowing against the debt. So that's kind of how Act 388 changed the funding sources.
Thank you. And a lot of people aren't aware of that, you know, breakdown. So I'm glad you said that, because there's not really a lot of details that simplifies it for, you know, the average citizen. All right, we're going to switch over to Nathan Campbell. So we know that Act 388 minimally provides a minimal adequate education. And there's a conversation about rural versus suburban and urban divide. Could you speak more to that, Mr. Campbell?
Yeah, when I moved, started teaching in South Carolina 13 years ago, I actually taught in an area that is still nicknamed to this day the Corridor of Shame. And so I got to see firsthand the discrepancy in funding, especially after year 4, when I moved down to Beaufort County and I saw night and day what this funding formula is doing. And so when we talk about funding and we talk about operational costs and that, at the county level, that's very important to understand, because at a state level, we're the ones that put that in place, meaning the state legislature. And so when you look at how do we want to change that, we have to change our state legislature. It's awesome being able to see people on the ballot like Jodie that understand how schools are funded, because then getting on the county council makes you an asset for that. And I look really excited at having somebody that's an education advocate at that local level, but we need statewide change. And when we look at our state legislature, they're the ones that can change Act 388, because we don't really see that many problems in education here, because we do have a robust tax base and we do have business and commercial taxes. We do have a lot of sales tax. And here's one of the things that is different when we drive 30 miles out the road and we see out in Jasper and in Allendale and in Hampton County, the neglect that's been going on when it talks about schools. Because in our state, one of the things that I think would be a huge help, especially in rural counties, would be a school building authority. A lot of states, like the state that I grew up in West Virginia, have a school building authority, and it helps rural counties that can't depend on a referendum to get all that money. Because again, $354 million was the biggest referendum we've had, and we had to go through failure to get there. If we all remember, we failed at getting that sales tax because we had to educate. And one of the things that Jodie did was she went out in the public and she educated people to where are your taxes going? Because 20,000 people move into District 46, my district, Beaufort, Bluffton, and Hilton Head. And so 20,000 people moving into town has fluxed a whole lot of money in town. And especially when we look at brand new schools that are overcrowded. Mm-hmm. I teach at a school that's 4 years old and kids eat on the ground in the cafeteria is full. So they got to go outside the cafeteria and sit on the ground. That I think is crazy. Now, again, we passed that referendum. We're ahead of schedule. So I see Dr. Rodriguez as being a huge advocate and a huge ally in trying to right some of these wrongs. But we need statewide leadership. And if we don't get in there and change the funding formula, we don't have to go back to something that's done in another state. Let's make this unique to our state and be able to debate this over the next 2 to 3 years. So then then within a 4-year term, you have meaningful change in the funding formula. Because again, we're looking at that being one of the biggest issues between the rural and urban divide in South Carolina. When we talk about that corridor of shame, if really, and see, this is why I think it's funny that some of our incumbents want to call that area the corridor of opportunity. Well, if you're not investing in education, what type of opportunity is it for real people?
Right.
And not corporations. So again, right. I'm glad that I'm in this race, because I'm able to bring these things to the forefront, because we have to keep our legislators accountable. And again, if we're not keeping our legislators accountable on every level, and education is so important, we're not getting any change out of our local legislators. When it comes to education, they have no power. They do not sit on the committees. They only throw out amendments to get their names in the paper, because they know that they won't pass in the end. So we really need meaningful change, and it starts with electing state legislators that care and have a public education mindset. And that's all I have to say about that.
Absolutely. And what you said, Nathan, is so profound, because education is that common equalizer. So, we cannot have or should not have quarters of shame where students are, susceptible to inadequate education.
Well, and if we look in the corridor of shame, who is it really disenfranchising?
Right.
It's disenfranchising African Americans. And we have to have people speak out to that and recognize the fact that we have to do something about it.
Absolutely.
And again, what solutions have we got for the last 18 to 20 years with some of our legislators that are career politicians? We need regular people to make meaningful change. And I think that's why all of us are running and have run for office.
Right. Great point. So both of you are awesome here tonight. All right, so we'll move on to topic 2, which is where does the money go? We're going to come right back to you, Nathan. Let's talk about funding streams and base student costs.
So when we now see this idea, when we hear these words, school of choice, and so we haven't actually dealt with issues that we know are things that we want to deal with in public education. We want to lower class sizes, and we want fully funded education systems. So when this new idea of school choice and letting kids go to other school, it gets really complicated, but we need to understand, in my opinion, not the opinion of other people on the panel, it is the resegregation of public schools. Because I am very adamant against increasing student-based costs to be fully funded. Then we will talk about pilot programs for helping out achievement gap problems. See, when you ask a state legislator this, he will bore you talking about the minute. And those details are what we know. Being a teacher on the ground, we know that we have curriculum improvements, testing improvements, and then lowering that base student cost, lowering class sizes, getting in there and reworking the funding formula. You're going to see the improvements that we expect in education, right? Because that's the things we've been complaining about for years. But what they're doing is they're not fully funding education. So we're not fully reaching our full potential. And so when we talk about these things, we need grant programs to target things like achievement gap problems and go into communities and target those communities that have that. Plus, if we actually use both sides of the aisle, we know that people on both sides of the aisle like an idea of some type of choice, but it has to benefit the public system. And so you have to fully fund the public system, and then you can start with some of these creative ideas that I think only teachers are going to be able to come up with, because we're the ones on the front line. Like, we're finally listening to nurses and doctors dealing with this pandemic on the front lines. So why don't we start listening to teachers? Why don't we start listening to law enforcement and incorporate these people into the conversation instead of denigrating them and excluding them outside of the conversation?
Absolutely. I'm sure every educator would agree with you on that, because they often at times with policy and legislative issues, they're left out of the conversation, but they're the ones in the trenches who ultimately are going to be held responsible either way for those decisions. So why not be inclusive of their thoughts? All right, so we'll jump into our next question. We'll come back to you, Jodie. So on the topic of where does the money go, let's focus on the truth about administrative costs and where operational funds are spent.
Sure. I think I think I heard you say asking about administrative costs and operational funds and where they're spent. So right. I do want to touch on Nathan's comments about choice, because I follow what you're saying, and I think that's been a hot issue this year as well with the CARES funding. You know, some of that was earmarked to go toward private schools, and that's in the courts right now. But there is a lot of people talking about choice and what that means. I love the idea of choice within the public school system, you know, as long as we're fully funding public education and, you know, our tax dollars are going towards institutions that will accept everyone. You know, I think that that's one of the main differences between, public-private is that private schools can be exclusive about who they accept. They can have admission standards. They can have testing standards. Often they have requirements for families to volunteer so many hours or do so much fundraising for the school. So, those types of things I get a little uncomfortable with when we're talking about public dollars going towards places like that. But I do like the idea of public school choice, and my kids participate in a choice program within our public school district. But yes, administrative costs and operations budget. So when we're talking about funding and streams of funding and where does the funding go, a big talking point that I've been hearing, and I heard, Nathan, I heard your opponent say it during the League of Women Voters Forum that you just did the other day, and I know my opponent has said it more than once in the forums that I've done, is that we're spending too much money on administrative costs. So it's not really that there isn't enough money. There's plenty of money, but we're not spending it in the right places. It's all going to the admin. Well, first of all, we haven't fully funded, the base student costs in quite some time. I mean, that's just a fact. But also, when we look at Beaufort County specifically, and I can't speak to other counties, but here, our county did an efficiency study earlier this year in April, and you can actually pull it up and see the entire presentation. It was presented to the school board during their work session on May 1st. But what this company found when they came in and did an efficiency study of the number of administrators and the roles that everyone has, and they went from the administrative level on down into the schools and into the teachers to evaluate, were we being efficient with our payroll and with our workforce? They found that Beaufort County spends the least amount of money on administrative costs of any of the school districts in South Carolina. We're only spending about 7%. And that's with school principals, programs, and also with administrators at the district office. So all of those costs, we really are not spending a lot of money here in Beaufort County on admin as compared to other counties in the state. The other thing is operations. And so you'll often hear, folks say that we're wasting money on, extra textbooks, for example. Well, Nathan, I go to these academic committee meetings and I go to these operations committee meetings. And if I can't make it there in person, I watch them online. I was at the academic committee meeting this year when the school district brought people in to explain the entire rubric and how the textbooks are chosen. So I think, if people really sat down and watched the inner workings of how these decisions get made, they would understand that it's not really wasteful spending. I mean, we are very, very careful about what we decide to spend our money on. In those cases, teachers are brought in to make those decisions. I do think at the state level, we need to do a better job of bringing teachers in to make decisions on, pay and all of that. But in this case, we are very careful about that. And I've sat in those budget meetings where we have school board members, literally debating whether we should spend money on, safety equipment on the playground or, smart boards in the classroom. I mean, that was one meeting I sat in. And then finally, someone had the good sense to say, maybe we could go a little bit over and we could do both. But these types of things, I don't think our county council representatives are really aware of all of those behind the scenes conversations. They just get the final budget brought to them and it's up or down, 3 readings. And I feel like they'd be a little bit more sensitive to the needs and the requests of the school district if they were a part of that process. So that's something that I've been doing for years and I plan to do going forward when I'm elected.
Yeah, and I just want to build off that real quick because, again, in cooperative federalism, you have to have people at each level that are working together. And so we have to have that critical alignment between city council, county council, state legislators. And Bridgette actually plays a large role in keeping our schools safe because, again, Bluffton PD is kind of in charge of being in May River and being in Bluffton High School. Mm-hmm. And so again, we have to have symbiotic relationships in what are we doing to help the public. And when I hear people say administrative costs, and I think back to that first school I was in where I taught African-American history from a textbook from 1992, and I started teaching in 2006. And yes, every textbook was horrible. I remember having to drive to West Virginia, where my stepfather was the superintendent of schools, because he said, I'm going to throw out 10 desktop computers. Do you think your kids might want them? And so what I set up was a mini computer lab within my own classroom by driving to West Virginia to go get those computers, because I knew those administrative costs are not the problem. And so we see where those discrepancies are. And those discrepancies are in the funding formulas, the big ideas. And so we're going to have to, like she said, advocates at the table. When we went up there and we advocated, that's how Jodie and I met, when we were advocating up there at the teacher rally. I said me and 10,000 of my closest friends, because we were out there trying to say we need to be heard. And if you saw the bill that they came up with this year, it was very clear that they didn't want to listen. And so now we need to change things. So now this next education bill, we had a blessing. They didn't want to pass the education bill this year. So next year, you better believe we're going to get twice as much, and for our students and teachers, not for corporations and not for private institutions.
Absolutely. And touching on what Jodie said a minute ago, you know, even with the success of the referendum, the power really rests with the citizens and with the public, and they want to be educated. And I think it's so irresponsible for anyone, especially an elected official, to make statements that are unfounded and kind of take that power away from people. I think once they're educated, actually know what's going on and what the ins and outs are, they're definitely more comfortable to be able to go in and make a decision when they're voting. And so we definitely need that. So thank you to you guys for doing that and keeping people aware and holding them accountable. All right, and we'll get to our last topic item for the evening, and that is teacher recruitment and retention. And we're coming back to you, Jodie. So with that, data on teacher retention, and we want to talk about the data on teacher retention and current openings in the Beaufort County School District. Also want to look at how does COVID impact teacher retention in your observation? And then is there a need for support systems for new teachers, such as a possible sign-on bonus and community initiatives like attaining housing?
Yeah, yes. All those things. No, teacher retention and teacher recruitment is basically at crisis levels here in South Carolina. You know, we lost over 5,000 teachers in the 2017-2018 school year. And according to data from Winthrop, they did a study last year in 2019. 25% of first-year teachers who started in that 2017-2018 school year were no longer teaching by the 2018-2019 school year in a public school in South Carolina. You know, so a lot of the time when we're talking about local issues here with teachers, or whether it's teacher pay or, you know, opening the schools or masks or any of these things, you know, I'll often hear people say things like, well, if they don't like it, they should just get another job. There is no one to take these jobs if they leave. And so we need to balance, right, the needs of the teachers and the things that they're asking for with, you know, the needs of the community as well. Because if we lose our teachers, you know, that contributes to larger class sizes, it contributes to a host of problems. So things that we can do, right? Things that we already do here in Beaufort County. So normally the state funds a step increase every year that's funded by the state. And then Beaufort County does what's called a COLA increase, which is a cost of living increase. That's done at the county level by Beaufort County Council. And they increase that year over year. This year, and just today, teachers were advocating and calling their state representatives. And again, we see that county level, state level partnership where you have to know what's going on at the state level to advocate effectively at the county level.
Right.
The Senate passed the budget, which included the step increase for teachers. It included a bunch of other things, bonus for essential workers and all these other things. It went to the House, and then the House sent it off to the Ways and Means Committee, and they're sitting on this bill. They don't plan to pass it until next year. And Governor McMaster has urged them to do that and just continue funding the state through a continuing resolution. So those teacher raises are frozen right now. So they were advocating for that today. We're at a critical point where we're asking teachers to do so much more. A lot of our teachers locally are teaching both virtually, and when we open on October 5th, we'll be teaching students face to face. So that means they have 10, 15, maybe more students in the physical classroom with them. And they're also simultaneously teaching that lesson on Zoom or something like that, just like you and I are. I don't know how effective that's going to be. I know a lot of our teachers are very stressed about having to do that. So we'll see how it goes. We're just going to support everyone as best we can. But we also need to have a conversation about how we support our working class people in Beaufort County generally, right? So whether it's teachers or nurses or firefighters or, folks that work at the grocery store or restaurant industry, we really need to get a handle on affordable housing here in Beaufort County. I know that they have formed the steering committee for the Regional Housing Trust Fund. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and this is something we're working on. I know Bluffton has contributed money toward that, and Beaufort and Port Royal, as well as the county, to get that going. But we really do need to make that a focus over the next few years, because eventually, our people who work here and try to earn a living here are going to have to go somewhere else if they can't afford to stay.
Mm-hmm. And sadly, some already are. I remember, teaching. We're in the first week of back to school and hearing about new hires, and then hearing, well, this person couldn't come again because they couldn't find, housing within their budget. They had to give up their offer and go elsewhere. And, it's such a shame to not be able to recruit, excited teachers to this area because of that. Okay, Nathan, we're going to go back to you. We're still on that subject of teacher recruitment and retention. And we want to talk about the state level funding for recruitment and what's available there for maintaining funding for higher education.
Well, obviously, when we talk about, and that's why I think that today might have been a blessing by Governor McMaster coming out and saying, I'm not going to pass that. Then now we have the opportunity to get not more, but the right changes in that education, because this is what they do. They want to throw money at teachers until it's an economic recession, and then we're the first ones to be cut and frozen out in pay. When I started in teaching, we were in the economic recession of 2008. And the issue was every year, Governor Mark Sanford, who my opponent worked for and was the chief policy advisor for, froze teachers' pay. Nikki Haley froze teachers' pay. And that's the first thing we cut from the budget. So is it any surprise to anyone why we're ranked where we are nationally? Because we have these huge discrepancies. We're lucky that we don't see that here as much, but we still have statewide problems when it comes to recruitment and retention because we haven't come up with creative ideas. Jodie just said it herself. If you can get a teacher to stay for the first 5 years, they're a teacher, they stay in the profession. So why are we not incentivizing staying for those first 5? The biggest hurdle is student debt. With Donald Trump getting rid of the teacher student loan repayment program, one of the things that we could do as a state is pick up where he left us out in the cold. And I am one of those people that was left out in the cold, paying on that program since it started. I was only a few payments away from having my loans repaid when Donald Trump got rid of it. I am like thousands of other teachers across the country in that we need help from our state. And not because it's going to help us out, it's going to help education out, be more stable, get that teacher to their 5th year. All I'm asking is for the same program, but less. And so as a state, all I'm asking is for the investment of $5,000 per teacher. if that teacher is paying off their student loans on time, after the year, we give them $1,000 to pay off their principal. That way, after teaching for 5 years, your student loan debt has decreased by at least $5,000. Now, if you're paying more off on that and you're paying your principal, there it's going down dramatically, as opposed to only paying off interest, which is what a lot of teachers are doing because they can't afford the other payments to pay down the principal.
Right.
And so the other issue comes down to getting them in housing, finding housing, like we talked, affordable housing. Well, I have a mortgage match program. If they get to 5 years and they put at least $5,000 down on their house, the state will come in and match that $5,000. Now, that is so we can get teachers in housing and sell these houses and help out with our affordable housing, right? We can get teachers in this affordable housing, fill it up if we've got this program, but we need to make it more attractive in our state to come here. That's why we see in our border areas, like where we are, we see them go to Georgia. If they have a better job offer over there, they leave us and go to North Carolina on the other side of the state. So one of the things is making the job more attractive. And I'm asking for an investment of $10,000 per teacher. That's actually less than the pay raises this year, if you think about it, because it's a one-time offer as opposed to a yearly increase in salary. So I'm asking for creative solutions that will help get teachers to stay in this state, so we will not have this recurring issue year after year where we have hopscotch between all the counties and we're all trading teachers around and we have to find new places to live. And just like you said, here it's being more and more complicated to the point where we have a lot of teachers that teach in our schools that live in Walterboro and drive an hour because they have more affordable housing there. That's a shame, and we really need to address that affordable housing. But I think that can be done through creative solutions, but also increasing your step increases and giving small incremental pay raises. So then you don't have to have teachers get mad every 10 years because you've neglected them. They can actually be respected every 2 to 4 years. It's a new concept, I know, but other states are starting to get it because their teachers are going on strike. And those are the type of things that I do not want to see in South Carolina. I do not want to see those things, but you're pushing teachers to an extreme, especially during this pandemic when we're asking questions and we're not getting answers because we haven't had leadership at the top. And that to me is another reason I'm in this thing, because we have to have new voices.
Absolutely. I think the both of you are spot on that. And if we are truly trying to create and build a community that's sustaining new talent and also is keeping people in the area, we're going to have to get serious about how we retain and recruit teachers, because they are essentially educating what's going to be our workforce and those who choose to stay and live here. All right, we'll see now if we have any comments.
Well, I'll jump in. I just want to thank you, Bridgette, again for hosting, and everybody who watched and shared this forum tonight. If you have not shared it and you enjoyed listening to the comments and the ideas and kind of the explanations about education here in South Carolina, please do share this so that we can get our message out to other people. It's been very difficult, obviously, as you can imagine, to run a campaign during a pandemic. It's very difficult for us to get in front of people, and talk about these issues face to face as we would like to do. So sharing is extremely helpful for us. And again, just for myself, I have been a public education advocate for the past several years and active in my community. And I show up, I'm there at these meetings and I follow along. And it's not just at the school district and it's not just at the county council, but I follow Town of Bluffton information too, because this is where I live. And I follow, things at the state level as well, because decisions that are made at the state level impact us here at home. So, I hope that you will visit my website, srutekforcountycouncil.com, and my Facebook page to get a little bit more information about me and know why I'm running here for Beaufort County Council District 7. Nathan?
So yeah, Jodie, I want to thank both of you because your advocacy for education is not only admirable, but it's inspiring. It really is getting people involved in this process of wanting to support our schools more. And I see that change in the last 4 years. And again, Jodie, your advocacy on getting that referendum passed, the work that you have been doing, it is exactly the type of resume that we need on the county council. We need energized women because we have enough men on that already. So we need some women on there because we need different opinions and we need more diverse opinions. So hopefully in the next few years, we'll get people running for county council and around here that will get those diverse opinions out there. Because again, like you're saying, it is hard to campaign during a pandemic. So for my shameless plug, please go to Campbell, 4sc.com. Volunteer time, guys. Go out there and talk. Share our posts, share information, talk to your friends. In my class yesterday, I am a school teacher. I asked the kids, I challenged them for their homework to go call 5 people or text 5 people and get them to check their registration. And if they're not registered to vote, get them to register to vote. And we had in 3 classes, 30 people were able to be registered by our kids in 3 classes.
Awesome.
The power is out there. We are energized. We are going to see these 20,000 new people that have moved into this area, along with the people that have lived here forever, that have wanted change, come out to the polls and participate. Make sure you're talking about your candidates and you're an informed voter, because that is the most important. If you are just going party line because that's what you think is appropriate, then you are uninformed. Go out there, get the information from their websites, go ask them questions. We will answer you. We want to do this for you. We're not doing this for ourselves. If we wanted this to be a career, then we wouldn't be here talking right now. We would be talking to big wigs and big corporations. We're trying to talk to regular people in our community to get what really is change. And that grassroots change, I see it happening in Bluffton. I see it happening in Hilton Head. I see it happening here in the Lowcountry and Beaufort and in the Jasper County. And so I just want to be an advocate for it to get people out to the polls and participate. So November 3rd is really something memorable.
Awesome. Well, this has been a wonderful evening. Thank you both. It's been very humbling to have been selected to be your moderator this evening on such a critical conversation here, talking about education in the Lowcountry. So we thank you, Jodie and Nathan. As they stated, they've given you their social media and website names and tags. Please go and follow them to be able to continue a conversation with them on this topic and any other topic that you may have a question or concern about.
Thanks so much, Bridgette. Have a great
night. Thank you, Bridgette.
You're welcome.